We're going to talk about what you can do about it, how you can handle it, and how do you prevent a bunch of communication fallout with my good friend, Andrew Carruthers, all on today's show. Your mind is a beautiful thing, but if left unattended, it can get ugly real quick. If you're not constantly curating the content your mind consumes on a daily basis, then your surroundings will dictate your daily thoughts, habits, behaviors, and actions. This show has only one goal: to leave your mind more beautiful than it was when you arrived. Welcome to the Beautiful Mind Show. What up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Beautiful Minds Show. And with me today is Mr. Andrew Carruthers, who is all around genius anyway, and founder of Journeys. What up, dude? How are you?
I'm awesome today, man. I'm so happy to be here talking to you about this incredibly important topic, communication.
Dude, isn't that the truth, man? We were talking about this, and I was just kind of saying, it seems like the world is running around with a sunburn, and people are trying to give everybody hugs and pissing everybody off, and people are just confused. They're like, but I was trying to be nice, and then all of a sudden I pissed you off. I don't know what's going on, and the world kind of lives in that space right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in a state, Jason, for 7 months of kind of our anxiety stage is just at an all-time high, and that's not where we're supposed to live. Anxiety is a natural thing that we experience because it's part of our body's defense system. Not supposed to stay in that state of anxiety. We're supposed to go into that state for a few moments, figure shit out, and then we're supposed to go back to oh, okay, I'm cool again. But everyone's just been so up here, and I love your.
I think one of the things
comparison
that
to the sunburn.
Oh, sorry, man. We glitched for a sec. Go ahead, bro. Sorry, I think I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I love the comparison to the sunburn because, yeah, I think that we've all been at this heightened state for so long that we kind of have that bit of sunburn right now. So everyone's, emotions are high and things are touchy.
Yeah, I think, I think to your point, there's kind of two veins of thought on this, and I want to be clear about the direction I want to go with this podcast for listeners. By the way, if you felt like everybody's had a sunburn, would you comment sunburn if you can relate to that analogy? Is that one of the things that I just see over and over again, Andrew, is that people are looking for somebody to blame for their sunburn, and I don't want this to be a show about it's the political climate, or it's I don't want to talk about politicians, Bill Gates, that. We're not trying to blame the world for what the problems are. I just want to talk about, and that's no judgment, by the way. I'm just saying just leave out the who are we trying to blame and say what can we do in the situation that we are in right now, if that makes sense. I want to figure out if you are in that situation, how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to your point, putting blame on something else, the important thing to recognize about that is as soon as you start to put all the blame outside of yourself, you have no ability to correct it. So the more that we take responsibility for our energy, the more we take responsibility for our focus, then we can say, oh, okay, if it's mine, I can actually do something about it. So yeah, take the blame out of it so that you can feel responsible for your own emotions and get back to a place where you have that sense of sovereignty, that you have control over the situation.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, right? Is we have so many, it's control the controllables, figure out what you can do. You mentioned we've been in this heightened state of this anxiety situation kind of across the board, right? Is that there's so much anxiety, so much pain that's going on in the world right now that people are just, trying to figure out what can they do to be able to have communication. And I think what happens is people are thinking they're being helpful by voicing their opinions online. Opinions are flying all over the place, pissing everybody else off. And it's you voice your opinion and everybody's trying to make their point. And there's a type of communication, Andrew, that I learned a long time ago that's called broadcast communication. And broadcast communication is, I want to tell you my opinion and I'm not interested in yours at all. So wait until I finish talking. Right? I know we might be having some glitches back and forth even in our communication. And I think it's a good example, even if you're listening to this podcast, there's a little glitch in our communication because it's an example of how broken communication can actually get when it's one subtle word is missing or one thing gets dropped. all of a sudden you go into broadcast mode, you can't hear the other person, you're talking over them, and all of a sudden you're no longer compassionate about what they have to say because you're just focused about getting out what you want to say.
Right. Yeah, and we were always taught, to that point, we were always taught, if your focus while someone else is talking is trying to formulate how you will respond, you are not listening. You're not in a conversation. You're just trying to have your voice heard. And in conversational intelligence, they call that level 1 communication. And there are times, especially as like a leader, that level 1 communication is okay. Because there's times where you just have to say, hey, here's what needs to happen. And there's a time where that kind of a communication is appropriate. But if you're looking to actually have a conversation, especially a compassionate conversation, there's that saying that the good Lord gave us one of these and two of these. So what do you think?
Right. Like use them accordingly, right? And I think one of the things that comes up for me when you talk about that, Andrew, about listening to other people's conversations and trying to figure out like how that level 1 conversation advances is we live in a world that people record a video and post it online. Then people can sit and take as much time as they want to respond in the way in which they want after 10 or 15 minutes of crafting the perfect response. And then they hit send on that response. And then somebody else spends time crafting their version of response. And I actually think, interestingly enough, it's stretched out communication. It's like text, mainly using text communication is interesting. And I see this happening in younger people in kind of like a dating scenario, right? Is that they have all these text communications. Like if I send you a text, Andrew, and I spend 5 minutes crafting you the perfect text, and then I send it to you and you spend 5 minutes crafting the perfect text, and then you send it to me. And then when you and I have a conversation in real life, it's super uncomfortable because I have to talk with you in real time, and my ability to take in what you process what you're saying and take that in and do all that, I no longer get the 5 minutes of response time that I get. And so it's interesting because conversations are much easier to have that heartfelt communication because you're staring somebody down in the eye. Like even when we're talking here, I'm still talking to a computer. I'm not really talking to you, even though I am really talking to you. Like it blocks this type of communication. And I think like you mentioned, this whole thing on for the last 12 months is like we've been building barriers. And I think you should catch this. If you feel that we've been building barriers, is that we've been building barriers in our communication, and they're invisible barriers because we actually still think we're talking to people face to face and heart to heart. And I heard one of our clients say that the other day. I just slid that in, but people said, "Are you having heart to heart conversations, or are you having brain to brain conversations, or mind to mind conversations?" And I think that's such a true conversation. Is like if you saw that person and you knew who they were, would you still say what you're about to type in as a comment?
Yeah, and I love the point that you just brought up because it's so true. If you have all that time to kind of plan out your response and kind of craft the perfect response, are you really kind of operating from that heart-centered or intuitive place, or are you crafting a response? And a lot of times that might take you into a synthetic space within the conversation if you're not able to kind of respond in the moment, because like Eckhart Tolle talks about the fact that the mind tends to live in the past and in the future, right? And so I think if you have that time to craft a response, are you really living in the moment, like where that intuitive and heartfelt space is? And I don't know, that's a great point, Jason. I actually haven't considered that specific challenge about how we are more in this computer and text-based kind of communication.
Yeah, I mean, look, Andrew, when I do live events, one of the things that comes up is we would literally talk about how do you remove the barrier of the table between the stage and the audience member? Is that literally just putting something like a table physically between you and that audience member creates an unintentional physical, it's a physical block, but it's also a mental block, right? So a teacher in a classroom is like, well, you sit behind your desk, I'll sit behind my podium, and everybody's got these barriers in place, right? We talk about them. And so how do you remove those barriers? Like you literally put people in a room or you sit people in a circle and we remove the physical barriers, but how do we remove those mental barriers in what people do? And again, when you're communicating, like I'm talking to my camera, which goes to a laptop, which goes to another server where we're broadcasting this thing there, that goes to you in your city, in your town, and you're behind a computer and all these other things. Like how many many mother loving barriers are between us right now to be able to communicate. And then you got delays and how long it takes for me to hear what you're saying. And like, it's just creating all of this chaos and all this confusion. And so what I'm really been paying a lot of attention to lately, Andrew, and I've heard this recently, it's really got my attention, is you can speak from your mind, which is where you're thinking and processing and doing this. And there was this concept that was introduced to me of like, there's your mind thought, and Andrew, this might be up your alley, because we've talked about this before, is that your heart actually can have thoughts, right? If you think of there's a your brain mind, your heart mind, and then depending on how you talk about it, there's a gut level mind or a spirit level mind, or I've just heard somebody else mention this yesterday, and it's just been in my conversation flow, so I want to bring it up, is he just said it's my center. Like there's my mind, there's my heart, and there's my center. I would say there's a mind, there's a heart, and there's a spirit. I don't know how you would tune that, but he said when all those things are in alignment, when all those conversations are real, you can actually speak from your truest self instead of trying to speak from your I'm going to get you self, which is very often your mind trying to be right. What's your thought on some of that? Because I know you've talked about this before.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up, because this is actually exactly my coaching principle. So I work with thought
this would be a good way to go.
Yeah, perfect. Nice setup. But I work with a coaching modality called multiple brain integration techniques. And it's based on exactly this. Esoteric belief systems have been telling us forever that we have way more wisdom when we're tapped into the whole system. If we operate solely from up here, we're missing a lot. So multiple brain integration, we've actually discovered now through neuroscience that your heart actually has neuroplasticity. Your heart actually has firing neurons that operate the exact same way that your head brain. Your entire enteric system from your mouth to the outlet is lined with neurons and exhibits neuroplasticity. Your autonomic nervous system, your pelvis, actually has a brain system to it. So right now, science has proven we have at least five different brain systems, intelligence systems within our body. But we've lived in a society for so long that's use your head. Don't tap into that emotional side. All these things, we've become so logic-based that our conversations, you're so on point, our conversations have become analytical processes. They've become, how can I respond to this in the right way? Let me think this out. Instead of tapping into the body wisdom, and that compassionate place, that intuitive place, that's where the real stuff comes from.
Yeah. I think it's such a good topic, Andrew. And by the way, if you want more information on this, I want to point you to some other resources too. There's a really good book written by a guy named Dr. Rada, and he wrote a book called Second Opinion. And he is one of the Mayo Clinic's leading heart, lung, and liver and kidney transplant surgeons, I think. And he talks about how patients mysteriously come up with these memories that they didn't have before once they've had other people's body parts like placed in their body. And he said the only explainable idea here is that the concept that your organs have memories that can transfer to the person that are there, that kind of confirms some of what we're talking about right now, Andrew, in addition to his research. But if you get a chance to read the book, and do me a favor, comment book, and I'll see if I can send you the link in there. But again, the book is called Second Opinion by Dr. Rada. Amazing book if you get a chance to look into it. And if this stuff is brand new to you, I hope it is, by the way, and you can start going down this path, because we say things culturally like trust your gut. Well, what the hell is your gut? Is your gut just, is your gut saying I'm hungry, or is your gut, is it that feeling of like this concept that we can have a better conversation with other people? And I think, Andrew, one of the things that happens is we get mentally put in this position that we go, well, my gut says this, but I'm going to respond this way because it makes more sense. Now I've thought of it. There's this concept, right? Count to 10 before you send. I remember when email and all that stuff first came out, everybody was like, well, don't just spell it off, because you perceive a barrier between you and the recipient. Like if you were in front of me, Andrew, and you said something, I'm like, Andrew, you're crazy. I might say it that way. But online, if you sent me something that you clearly sat and spent all this time thinking about, and I really don't like it, I might sit and pound out an email for another 20 minutes and do it, because you're no longer responding from a place of what your gut level response is to another, heart to heart or connected spirit to spirit. entity, you're now responding with what your logic is upset about, all your pain that you've experienced. And by the way, if you don't know this, the more time you spend thinking about a subject, especially when you're aggravated, the more pissed off you will become, right? So Andrew, if you send me something, hey, Jason, sorry, I got to cancel on today's show, and then I wait 10 minutes, am I more upset 10 minutes later, or am I less upset 10 minutes later, right? Chances are that I'm more upset 10 minutes. I'm like, damn, that Andrew, he left me hanging. Oh, I can't believe it. You know, like whatever I want to make up in my head, Andrew probably thinks that I'm a jerk, and he's probably just doing it to piss me off. Maybe it's because I forgot to call him the other day. Maybe it's because of this. And I start building this case and this story, and we all become like our own mental, in our own head attorneys, building a case for why the other person is a piece of crap. And then that's how I respond to you 10 minutes later in an email or in a comment or in a thread or a Reddit post or whatever it's going to be. And then I respond to you with broadcast communication.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my friend to get in this giant argument with like, you ever done this one, Andrew, where like you start that on accident? It's like you say something, then they say something, and then it starts to like, I just wrote you a novel back and you got to make the decision. Do I have time to respond to this or not? You ever been in one of those?
Oh, yeah. I think I actually did it this morning.
I like it. So at least there's some reality coming out here. And by the way, if you can relate to that, guys, do me a favor and say relate in the comment, because I think we all live in that spot. So Andrew, what kind of things do you do to create more compassionate communication, whether you're communicating online? I mean, look, you and I put out a lot of video content, and it kind of puts us in broadcast communication a lot. Like I try and do it by like saying comment below, have an interaction, comment with me, send me a DM, like let's talk about it. And I'll have conversations in real time anytime anybody wants. But what kind of things do you do to build up your compassionate communication to have better and less crazy arguments?
I think one of the things that's really important is to actually learn your particular communication style. A great resource is the DISC profile. We did that with your group, Jason.
Yeah,
the
that was
DISC
awesome.
profile is a fantastic resource to learn what is your natural communication style. Because what will happen through that process, not only will you learn how you interact with other people, but you'll start to learn that everyone around you is their own unique version of communication style. So it starts to build some empathy towards other people, where you can say, okay, like Jason's he's a high D for sure, like super.
What?
Well, you actually might be a high I too. But that high energy, like, yeah, okay, come on, yeah, shit, like you want to respond and react pretty quick. I'm actually the polar opposite. I'm a high C, which I want to slow it down. I want to think it through. And I used to get really offended by high D's and high I's because I was like, God, dude, just relax. Stop pushing me around. Stop being so rude. But then I recognized through my training that, oh, wait, he's not trying to do anything to me. Jason's just being his naturally born and integrated self, which builds empathy and compassion then. I can say, oh, okay, I understand where Jason's coming from now, and I can respond to that versus react to it, which I think is a great distinction. If you respond to things versus react to things, that's a great technique as well to become more compassionate. But I think one of the hardest things, Jason, is we've really been brought into a space right now, and especially in this last year with the presidential election, with COVID, with everything that's happened, even with the discussion around racism, people have been pushed to sides of a perception. And being on a side has become what people are telling us is necessity. Instead of allowing space for each individual to make a decision for themselves, it's like, well, whose side are you on? And so we've been pushed into this place where we have to say, well, I'm on this side, so that means I'm going to judge you from the opposite side that your opinion's terrible and it sucks. And so we really have to get ourselves back to a space where we can say, you know what, I'm going to have respect for other people and say, even if I don't agree with them, I can still be compassionate and empathetic in my communication with them.
Yeah. Well said, dude. And one of the things that came up as you were mentioning that for me is another thing that I try and find is like, what is the most, can I find 3 points of commonality with anyone that I'm talking to? Right?
Nice.
Because you mentioned it, Andrew. And like for me, it's the same thing, right? Like I've always been like a quick go get it. Like I'm an improv comic, like stand on stage, like do all the stuff as fast as humanly possible. And to your point, when I typically had in the past interacted with people who I would have considered slow and wasted my time and like burned all that stuff versus understanding that I can have great communication with people who communicate differently, to exactly our point. Like the best shows that we can have are shows with somebody like me and like you, because it provides some contrast. It gives some space.
Yeah.
I've also been training and studying breath work, which says, here's how I can slow down, right? Like those are some other really good things. But when I work with somebody, my goal is as quickly as possible, no matter who it is, to find 2 or 3 points of commonality with that person that I can find. And by the way, it's not a point of commonality of like, who do we hate more? Like, I don't mean it that way. I mean, like, I want to find 3 things about Andrew that he and I both love. Like, dude, I loved watching some of your Journeyist posts where you're outside and you're hiking and you're going out and doing these adventures. And I know you love views and outdoors. I'm like, that's a really big deal to me, right? And then we're connected to the industry, through the salon spa industry. And we also both are a bit of technology dorks, right? Like we have just a little touch too much technology around us at any given point in time, right? Like that's part of it. So I'm like, oh, cool. I got 3 points of commonality with Andrew. And it doesn't have to be because we hate the same political figures or love the same political figures, or we both are angry about this movement or this not movement that exists. Like we don't have to don't find commonality in hate. Find commonality in love. Find something that you both love and can obsess about. And the people that I hang out with the most are the ones that I have things that I love that I can do with those people. Those are the people I want to spend more time with. And if you're in a situation where you're trying to find out, Jason, this person I'm trying to get along with, I can't find any point of commonality with them, no matter what I do, no matter how I've done. And you know what my answer to you is? Then you got to try harder. You really do. Like, I promise there's something about their kids, something about their cat, something about their car, there's something that they are really into that if you are willing to ask a few more questions, you will probably find some points of commonality. And the second you do, it's like a breath of fresh air gets breathed into that relationship.
Yep.
It's all of a sudden you're like, oh, you're a human being with a heart that I can have a conversation with, instead of being obsessed about just the angry things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to your point, if you can't find something kind of external that you have in common with that person, you have one thing internal that you have in common with every single person on this planet. And I hate to say it, but it's suffering. Because at some level, everyone's got something. You see these Instagram quotes all over the place. Be gentle, because everyone's dealing with something. And that's the truth. Like, there's not a person on this planet that doesn't know what it's like to have heartache. There's not a person on this planet that doesn't know what it's like to be filled with anxiety at some day. There's not a person on this planet that hasn't felt sad in their life. So know that even if you have nothing in common externally, everyone has this in common inside, which is a heart. Even if they don't show it on the outside, they still feel. And so that to me also brings compassion, to just know that that person sitting next to me, I could have zero in common on the external world, but there's still a feeling, breathing, spiritual human, whether they express it or not. And that we can always find commonality in.
Yeah, I think that's really good, right? Is you said the word suffering, and I think, initially when you said the word suffering, I was like, oh no, we're going negative. And I didn't mean you. I just meant in my mind, like that was it. But I love how you phrase that, because it's not about like find compassion in your suffering and you can commiserate with each other, but understand that person struggles like you struggle. Understand that person struggles to make a life for themselves. Understand that person struggles to have communications the same way you do. And again, you can say, like, especially when you come from a place of what can we build together? What can we do as a team? What can we unite in against, but not unite in against something as external, as a person or as a thing. But what if that thing that you unite against is like our suffering in becoming better every single day? Like, I love, Andrew, surrounding myself with people who want to get better at something every single day, which is, again, dude, the last time you and I talked, we were talking about camera gear and upgrading the look and feel of some of that stuff, and like all that stuff is like, and it's like the suffering, we just talked about it right before we started the show. How's this streaming service working for you? Like, this is working. Is this better? And we're both like, oh, this one's working okay. That one's working okay. Because that suffering that we deal with of like the tech glitches and all those other things that exist can be a point of commonality that we get united in coming out of the suffering and lifting people up on the other side and being able to help people, see better versions of themselves. And I think it helps you see. I wrote this quote this morning. I want to read it real quick, Andrew. I might post it tomorrow as part of my hard lessons. By the way, if any of you guys have been watching any of the hard lessons, do me a favor and type hard lessons. But I just wrote this down just because it hit my heart this morning. And by the way, all my hard lessons I've been sharing I've tried to get up every single day and say, okay, what does my heart say? What does my spirit say? Not what does my head say, Andrew, right? Just what does my heart say? What's my spirit say? And this was just what hit me from today. It might show up tomorrow. But it says, when you see things from a different set of eyes, it allows you to go places you've never been. And I don't know if somebody else said that. That was just what was on my heart this morning. And I just say that from this idea that we're talking about here, Andrew, is like, if you want to prevent, if you want to stop pissing people off, try to pay attention to for a hot second, right? It's like, try their eyes on, see it from their perspective, pay attention to what they might see in their day, and literally try to mentally walk through somebody else's day and see if that changes your perspective. Anything you want to add to that, man?
Well, I think you just described the difference between compassion and empathy versus something like sympathy. Sympathy is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and you enter into that pain with them. Compassion and empathy is just being present to it and saying, I can understand why you'd feel that way. I'm sorry you're feeling that way today. I'm here for you. Because then you're not entering into that space with them. You're not you're not enjoying that kind of suffering with them. You're just being present with them and being understanding. And that's really what we're asking for with compassion, and empathy, is just like you said, just, maybe try on their goggles for a second and say, oh, wow, you know what? Yeah, I can see how you can see that.
Totally. So guys, if you enjoyed the show, you enjoyed this discussion about compassionate communication and ways you can have better communication so you can avoid slapping people's sunburn nonstop, whether you're online, in person, in your business, or anything like that. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor and say enjoyed in the comment section. And if you want to have Andrew back for another Beautiful Mind show, because, dude, I certainly would love to have you back on a regular basis, dude. I'd love to have you back. Do me a favor and say Andrew back. I love just chatting with this dude, and if I can involve you in it, we will, and continue the conversation. So thanks, Andrew, so much for being on here. I definitely would love to have you back. We'll see how everybody else throws it out there as well. But man, this show, I hope, is going to really touch some people, change people's lives. And it's always thanks to guests like you that come on and stretch my thought and my ability to connect. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, and your knowledge, brother, man. Anything you want to say as we wrap?
No, just much love to you all, and let's be kind to each other.
Heck yeah, dude. Thank you so much. And thanks for watching the Beautiful Mind Show. We're going to be rocking and rolling with a new podcast channel very soon. So keep an eye out for that, for the Beautiful Mind Show. And as always, you can also check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, and there's all types of other content. Look up myself, or you can look up Mr. Andrew Carruthers and all of his good channels. We'll post the link down in the comment section. You can get access to that. Andrew, thanks so much for being here again, man. Have a great rest of your day.